In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can make some fun Easter chicks and bunnies, doing some simple sculpting. It's a nice, easy follow-along tutorial, and you can do it all with a mouse. You don't need a graphics tablet or anything. You will need some understanding of the interface, so moving about, adding objects and things like that. If you're a complete beginner, then check out my beginners playlist. And if you like what I do, then check out my playlists on this channel and my website for more great content. So open up Blender and get ready to follow along. Okay, so I'm in a new default scene. I'm using Blender 3.1. My shortcut keys are displayed down the bottom here. And we'll start off by selecting the default cube with left click. We want to give this some more faces so we can easily sculpt it. The easiest way to do that is to press Ctrl 3, and that adds a subdivision surface modifier. So under the modifiers here, we've got a new modifier, the subdivision surface. And we can go up to about 5 levels. That gives us quite a lot of detail. And we can click on the down arrow here and click apply. That's applied this modifier, so it's become a part of this mesh. If I zoom in, you can see all the faces there. It's also made it nice and round for us, and that's a great starting position for our bunny. So let's go across to sculpting. And we've got our brushes on the left-hand side here. I'll click and drag to pull out the names so you can see what I'm using. But generally, I'm using the grab brush. So I'll click on that. You can resize your brush with F and move your mouse side to side, and that will resize it. And we can make our brush nice and big, round about this sort of size, and start changing our shape. But before we make any changes, we'll enable X symmetry, so anything I do on one side will mirror on the other. I'll undo that though. So with my brush nice and big, around about this sort of size, I'm going to pull out the top like this to make it more of an egg shape. I'll come around to the side here slightly, and if you're in doubt where you are, there's the Cartesian coordinates up here, so you can see those moving around. And when you're in front view, the X is going across this way, and the Y is going away from us. So I'll come around to the side slightly so we can see my X a bit more, and I'll move their front outwards a little bit this way, so maybe they're sticking their chest out and they've got a big bum. I'll come around to the bottom and squash that down slightly so they're kind of sitting on the floor, so it's a little bit flatter at the bottom like this. Now if I go to top view with 7 on my numpad, or I can just click on the Z here, so that's minus Z and positive Z, Z if you're American of course, I can just curve out my shape a little bit more. It has a tendency to go a bit square if you're not careful. So we've got our egg shape there, a little bit less on the front, just about there I think. You can vary your shape loads. You could have a very big chest like this, very thin chest like this. That's entirely up to you. It's great fun to experiment, so try some things out. Okay, so we've got our basic shape for the body. Let's go back to layout mode now, and we'll add in some ears. So I'll shift right click to move my 3D cursor. That's where my objects are going to be added. Shift A to add, mesh, and then a UV sphere. I'll scale that down, move it into position. So I'll go to side view with 3 on my numpad, or use the Cartesian coordinates. Move that up to there, round to front view, take a look, and I want this to be copied to the other side. The easiest way to do that is come to our spanner here, add modifier and mirror. That mirrors it on the x-axis, but it's mirroring around its origin point, the middle point there. I want to mirror around the body, so I can use the mirror object, use my pipette here and select the body, and it mirrors around the body. Now when I move this, G to grab, you can see that it's mirroring around the origin point of this object here. So I'll select that sphere again, move it back up to the top, around here, and scale in the Z. S, then Z. Rotate those around a little bit, move those into position. We've got some big bunny ears. Let's just go to side view with 3 and see how they're shaping up. Now you might want to move those forward slightly, perhaps somewhere around there. Again, move around your object, see if it's working out for you, and that looks pretty good. Now you might be asking, why didn't we use a sphere for the beginning object for our body? Well, we could have done. But if I zoom in, you can see the spheres that I've added have not got that many faces, so we'd still have to add the subdivision surface modifier, and I quite like the way the cube comes out when it's rounded. Anyway, let's go into sculpt mode with our ears. So across to sculpting. Now I've got an error message here. Object has non-uniform scale. So let's actually go back to layout mode now. And what that means, if I press N on my keyboard and go to item, the scale isn't all the same. We've got a larger Z-axis to the other two. And that's when I scaled it in the Z-axis to elongate it. We need to reset this to 1. So with that object selected, in object mode, Control A, apply scale. And you can see that's now set to 1. Now when I go to sculpt mode, I don't get the error message. Okay, let's play with the ears a little bit and see what we can do. Maybe bring out the bottom and squish them in a bit like this. That looks kind of fun, but you may notice that these have less faces than these. And if I start moving it about and stretching it over here, for example, if you wanted to do that, you can see that I'm getting jaggedy edges. I'll undo that. It's really easy to add faces to this so we can make our sculpts more smooth. That's using the remesh option up here. That will add lots of faces to your mesh, and the voxel size is how big the faces are going to be. There's a great way of seeing how big they're going to be by pressing Shift R, and you can see the size that the squares are going to be made here, and I want to go really fine to about 0.01. Left click there, and I can come up to the remesh and press remesh there, or I can press Ctrl R to apply the remesh. Now it looks a little bit like nothing's happened, but if I zoom in, you can see there's lots of tiny little squares now. I'll zoom out again. I really need to smooth this out though. So if you hold down Shift, you can smooth out your shape like this, nice and easily. So holding down Shift jumps you to the smooth brush, and when you release Shift, you go back to your original brush. Now I want to create a dent in my ears. I could do this with the grab brush, or the draw brush is a little bit easier. I'll zoom in a bit for this, and again resize my brush. If I draw at the moment, it actually adds volume, so it pushes it out. I'll undo that, but if I hold down Control, that will dig in, and I've managed to create some kind of bunny ears. Just do that once more, and there we go. Some simple bunny ears. The strength of the brush is 0.5. You can up the strength and have more impact when you push it in like this, but the default of 0.5 I think works well. You might want to use the grab brush now, and maybe reshape your ears, pull them around slightly, whatever you think, but I think they look quite fun. Okay, so we're doing well. Let's go back to layout mode to add some eyes and a mouth. So I'll Shift right click to move my 3D cursor, Shift A to add, mesh, and then UV sphere. Let's scale that right down so it's nice and small like this. And again, we want to mirror that to the other side. So where the spanner is, or wrench if you're American, add modifier, mirror. And again, it's mirroring around the origin point, so it looks like nothing's happened, but let's choose the mirror object of the body, and it mirrors to the other side. Now let's go to front view with 1 on my keyboard, or again, use the -Y just here on the Cartesian coordinates, or you can actually press the tilde key, which is the key next to the 1 on your keyboard, and you can go to front view there. Now you can press G to grab and think exactly how far apart you want your eyes, probably somewhere around here I think. Then I'll go to side view by clicking on that X or pressing 3 or pressing the tilde key and going to right view. And let's zoom in and just make sure they're sticking into our mesh the right amount. And that looks quite good actually. So back to front view, I want a nose here. So Shift right click to move my 3D cursor, Shift A to add, and then UV sphere. Scale that right down. Maybe a little bit bigger than the eyes, so I'll make the eyes a little bit smaller. Somewhere around there I think. Looks fun. Just come around to the side, make sure that's digging into our mesh nicely, and that's looking pretty good. Okay, how about a mouth? So I'll Shift right click to move my 3D cursor down to here. Actually maybe up a little bit to around about there. Shift A to add, and this time we'll use a curve. A Bezier curve is probably the best, but a path curve can often be easier to understand. So if you're finding the Bezier curve tricky, then have a go at the path instead. I'm going to use the Bezier, so I'll click on that, and you can see it's sort of sticking into my mesh at the moment. I'll go into edit mode for this, so press Tab, or you come up to edit mode here, and that way we can edit the shape of our curve. I'll select all with A, or you can click and drag and select everything. And I'll scale in the Y-axis, so that's the green, 0, and that will flatten it out for me. So pressing S, Y, and 0. Now I'll scale it all down, and I'll select the end points, and I'll go to front view with 1 and rotate them. So R to rotate, and this one R to rotate. It's better if they're roughly the same size, so I can scale this one up. But make sure you're grabbing the middle point. These are handles, and you can kind of rotate those as well, and it makes the curve more curved. But we can just move that middle point inwards like this, and it does the job nicely. I'll go back into object mode with Tab, so that's object mode up here. Come to side view with 3, G to grab in the Y, so G to grab in the Y axis, which is the green, and rotate it round so it's roughly in line with my mesh. So it's sitting on top there. It's a bit weird at the moment, so we need a bit of adjustment. I'll scale it all down and go into edit mode and start adjusting again. If I scale these handles down, that will be less of a curve. Rotate that one round. And somewhere like that looks quite fun. Might be a little bit big, so I'll scale it down even more. And you can always experiment with the position by G to grab and moving it around. Now we want to add some volume to our curve. I'll come to the curve properties down here, which are the object data properties. And if we scroll down a bit, we've come to geometry. So we're adding geometry to our object, because at the moment, if we render this, we won't be able to see it. So under the geometry, I'll zoom into my object a bit so you can see what's happening. And we want to come down to where it says bevel, and we can up the thickness of the bevel, and that creates a kind of pipe. And then we can fill the caps, and we've now got a smiley bunny. So it's looking pretty fun. Let's go across to the shading workspace to add some color to our bunny rabbit. So first of all, let's start with the eyes. So select those, add a new shader. I'll move this up a little bit and we'll call this black. And currently it's got a base color of white. So we'll change that to black. I usually don't go all the way to black. I find it's helpful to go a little bit away. It's just easier to manage when you're compositing later on, but don't worry too much about that. Let's zoom in, see what that looks like. That looks okay. We want the nose and the mouth to share the same color as that. So I'll select both those with shift left click. Select the eyes last. So they're the active object and they're highlighted yellow, so you can tell that. And you can see the material that they've got there. I'll press Ctrl L to link the materials together. So that's Ctrl L for link. So there we go, not looking too bad, but it'd be nice to get a little bit of pink on the cheeks of the bunny rabbit and in the ears. Now you could texture paint for this, but it's a little bit easier if we go back to sculpting and we use what's known as the Vertex paint. So we're going from sculpt mode to Vertex paint mode. We can change the color to a pinky color, so somewhere across here, and you can see the color you're getting up there. I only want a tiny bit, so just a little bit of saturation, and saturation is how colorful it is, so how far out to the edge of the circle you are. So somewhere around there looks good, nice and bright, and I can come onto my object and paint, as you can see there. I'll undo that though, make my brush nice and small, and we just want some rosy cheeks like this. Now you can see it's a bit sort of blobby around the edges. That's because, like it's called, Vertex paint, it's only painting on the vertices. So I'll quickly go into edit mode and you can see all the points are vertices there. And now back to Vertex paint. And that's why it's all blobby when I paint. So I'll undo those strokes. What I need to do is add a few faces to this. It will also help smooth our shape out. So back to sculpt mode and we can use the remesh. So I'll press Shift R to see the voxel size and bring that down to 0.01, somewhere around there, and Control R to remesh. And you can see that's done a nice job of adding faces. If I zoom right in, you can just about see those faces. To smooth this out, we could make our brush nice and big, go over the whole shape with Shift, and that does a fine job. There is an easier way. If you scroll right down to the bottom, there's what's called mesh filters. If you click on that, change the filter type to smooth, you can just click and drag and move your mouse to the side, and it smooths it out. As you can see, somewhere around there. So let's go back to the Vertex paint now. Make my brush nice and small and add a bit of pink cheeks like this. Okay, let's try and paint on the ears. If I click, I can't seem to paint on them. That's because they're a separate object and we can only paint on the object we've got selected here. I'll undo that. To jump to another object in sculpt mode, we press Alt and Q over that object and you can see it sort of flash red like that. I can now paint in here like so. I'll undo that though, make my brush a bit smaller and paint in the middle here. So the middle bit first, and then change the strength down, and then paint around the outside of that, and then it's sort of blended in a bit more. I'll press Alt Q on my main body as well, and maybe just go around the outside of these with that lighter strength. Okay, so we've got some Vertex paint on there. Let's go back to the shading tab, and unfortunately we can't see it. So we've got this base material here, and I'll rename that Bunny Body. And I'll make sure the ears have the same materials. So at the moment it's got nothing, and I can click on the drop down and check the bunny body. So they've both got this material. What I need is to add a node in here to tell it to use the Vertex colors. So Shift A to add, Input, Vertex colors. If you can't remember where that is, you can always search for it, Vertex, and there's Vertex color at the top there. And all I need to do is plug this into the base color and it appears there. So we've got our nice pink ears and cheeks. Our material's a bit shiny at the moment, as you can see there, so I can bring up the roughness of this material and I think that looks a lot more soft and nice. Now let's add in the floor and think about lighting. I'll go back to layout mode for this. Shift A to add, mesh and plane, that's our floor. 1 to go to front view, G to grab and move that down. They can indent the floor slightly and that looks a little bit better. And I'll scale this up. And I'll scale this right up so it's nice and big. And we'll just look down on our objects like this. That should work really nicely. I also need a light in here, and I can just use the default light here, but I don't like the point light, I prefer an area light, and I'll make that nice and big, really big like this, and I'm actually going to remove any rotation, so press N to hide or make visible this panel, go up to item, click and drag on these, and turn it to 0, and then it's pointing directly downwards. Now I'll go to side view, G to grab, and just point it forwards slightly like this, and again make it even bigger, look at that. Absolutely huge light. And I'll make sure it's right over the top of my bunny. Okay, let's go to the shading tab and see how it looks. At the moment we're in material preview mode, so we're not seeing any effects of our lighting. I'm going to go across to rendered mode, and now we're seeing the effects of our lighting. Looks kind of alright, but not great. First of all, let's select the bottom and give this maybe a sort of bluish colour. And you can go bright or you can go quite dark. Depends what sort of look you're going for. I went for a fairly dark colour, and actually I'll give that a little bit more blue, round about there. The darker colour makes the light bunny stand out more. I'll just zoom out a bit and select my light again and go to the lighting properties here, and I'm going to increase the strength to 5000. This will depend greatly on how big your scene is. So at the moment my bunny is absolutely massive, so I've got a very powerful light to deal with that. And in fact, I'm going to make that light even bigger. There we go. And it looks kind of cool there. Now, I much prefer cycles as a render engine, so I'll go to render properties, change the render engine to cycles, and you can see the lighting's a lot more effective. I always change to the GPU because I've got a powerful RTX 390 graphics card, and turn the denoise on, and you almost get a live update then. What can also help with the lighting is to go to the properties here in the shader editor and go to world, and bring in an HDR into your background. So Shift A to add, texture, environment texture, press open, and I've got lots of HDRIs downloaded, which stands for high dynamic range images, which can go in the background, and they actually light your object with different color and tone of light, and they give a really nice realistic look. Search the site Polyhaven for free downloads of those. Something like this where it's fairly grey can look quite nice, so I'll open that, hook it up to my color, and you can see it's got this really nice soft lighting on it. I think my light's a bit powerful now, so I'll just select my light, go to my lighting properties and turn that down to something like 3000. And there we've got a very cute looking bunny. And at this point you can just adapt maybe the color of your floor, probably go a little bit darker, more saturated, and that's looking quite nice. Maybe a bit more roughness actually. I think that looks even better. So looking very cute there. How did I make the chick? Well, now you've made the bunny rabbit, you can probably figure out how I made the chick. And it's a really good challenge to try and do that by yourself. So maybe pause the video and try and do that by yourself, and then restart the video and I'll show you how I made it. So pause the video here if you want to have a go at that. Okay, so I'll go back to layout mode and I'll add a little chick next to the bunny. So Shift right click to move my 3D cursor, Shift A to add, mesh, and then just to show you can start with a UV sphere, I'll start with a UV sphere. I'll zoom in on that with period key on my numpad, or you can go to view, frame selected, and this needs a few more faces, so I can press Ctrl 3 to add lots more faces. Remember, if we come across to the modifier properties, that adds the subdivision surface modifier, and then we need to just apply that, so with this drop down, apply. I'll just press G to grab, move it above the floor, and then go across to sculpt mode. Make sure the X-axis is ticked for symmetry, and again choose the grab brush. Make my brush nice and big, and make it a bit of an egg shape like this, maybe a little less rounded, somewhere around here, not quite as big as the bunny rabbit. Again, you can change your chick shape around as much as you like, and it's really good fun to experiment. Probably around there, I think, just a little bit more sticking out of the back. Okay, let's go back to layout mode. Shift right click to move my 3D cursor to the top, Shift A to add, and we'll add another UV sphere. I'll scale that right down to about here, go to side view, and you can just go into sculpt mode now and start sculpting this into the sort of weird Mohican chicken hair thing that you can see on mine. But what we can also do is create 3 of these, join them together, and then sculpt. It's a slightly easier starting point. So G to grab, move that there, Shift D to duplicate, so Shift D, move one there, and Shift D to duplicate again, and move another one to there. I can select all these 3 and join them together, so Control J. Then let's go to front view, make sure that's lined up with the middle, so G to grab, somewhere around there, and then across to sculpting. Now because they're all joined together, I can remesh them, so Shift R to see my voxel size. Now it's really small. The reason it's really small is because I've scaled these but forgotten to set that scale. So let's go back to layout mode, and you can see my scale's really small there, so Control A and apply the scale. Now back to sculpt mode, Shift R, and the remesh is the right size. So I'll go down to 0.01 and Control R to remesh, then to side view, and I can start turning these into funny shapes. That sort of spiky Mohican thing. That looks fun. Let's go to front view, see what that looks like. Now I forgot to press the X-axis, which is a bit annoying, but I can just make my brush nice and big and move those into the middle. And if you ever forget, you can come up to the top here, and the down arrow, there's a symmetrize, and we want to go from the positive, so the positive side is this side, the negative is this side, and I can press positive X to minus X and symmetrize, and it comes back to here, which isn't great, but I can smooth that out, turn on the X axis, squeeze that in, and that's a little bit better. Still needs a bit of smoothing, there we go. So remember, hold down Shift for smoothing, and just squeeze these in with the grab brush and make them any shape you like. Now for the beak, back to layout mode, Shift right click to move my 3D cursor, Shift A to add. There's lots of things you could add. A cone would work for this. I think a UV sphere works nice and easily though, so I'll scale that right down, move it into position around here, Control 3 to add a subdivision surface modifier, apply that, then go back to sculpt mode, across the side view, and let's turn on the symmetry this time and make it into a beak. Something like that looks pretty cool. Perhaps give it a bit of pointiness at the top. It's entirely up to you, just make it sort of beak shaped, I think. There we go, not looking too bad. Let's go back to layout mode and add in some eyes. So Shift right click, Shift A to add, mesh UV sphere, scale it all the way down, back to front view, it's digging in nicely, and we just want to mirror it. So add modifier mirror. Again, we can't see anything yet. We need to select our mirror object, which is the chick body. And there we go, we've got our chick. I think it wants to be a little bit smaller though. So I'll select all those, deselect the floor and scale it down, come to front view and move it into position somewhere around there. Then it's a case of going across the shading. And for this, we don't really need to paint anything. We can just make the body nice and yellowy. So base color, across to the yellows, somewhere around there. It's a little bit orangey. So probably a little bit more that way. That's a bit better, isn't it? And that looks fun. For the eyes, they can have the same color as these. So I can select one of those, Control L and link materials. The beak, that can have a new red material. Somewhere around here. A little bit orangey, I think, looks quite nice. And a lot of roughness, I think. And the top can have the same as the beak. So select both those. The one you select last is the one you'll link to, so Control L, link materials. And there we go, we've got a chick and a bunny. So hopefully you enjoyed that tutorial and you found it fun. And you challenged yourself to have a go at doing the chick. Again, if you like what I do, then check out my channel for lots of playlists with simple courses like this, and check out my website for more great content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.